Hello, thank you for coming to another interview with the authors of the Midwest Fantasy Sampler. Today we're speaking to R M Krogman, who wrote Whisperers for her series Keepers of Midgate. Rebecca, thanks for coming on.
I'm excited to be here.
Lovely. And so Whisperers was a story set in the world of Midgate, which you have a couple different series involved with. How many books are in your series, and what are your plans for expanding them?
So, just the number of books keeps on growing, I can tell you that. But the original books, the original story that kind of got me going in the world of Midgate is a trilogy. So, an epic fantasy trilogy called Liberation, Sundering, and Schism. So, for sure, you can expect those three to be finished complete pretty soon here. And then I also found that as I was writing that there was just so much more depth to some of the characters. There was backstory that I really wanted to share. There was a side story that I wanted to share, and it wasn't necessarily something that belonged in the main story. And so then I started the kind of offshoot series of stories of Midgate. And so far I have three books in that, and there will be more. Every time I kind of come up with new histories, I usually put them in the stories of Midgate.
Well, I think that's a problem a lot of epic fantasy writers run into. I know I did. Like, I started writing my own series, and I wrote one story set in the world, and I wrote another story set in the world in a completely different time period. And then I decided I wanted to write sequels to my first books. So I had
Mm-hmm.
this kind of like out of order, awkwardly staggered series. And eventually I cut them all up. And so now I have three different series operating in this world with a fourth one planned when the initial plan had just been one set. As you like figure out
It
how you want to build
grows.
the world and expand, your time periods shift, your focus shifts, and I think a lot of people hit that wall.
Yeah.
What is the overall plot of your main trilogy?
The main trilogy is, as I mentioned, an epic fantasy, kind of in the traditional bent of pseudo-medieval setting, although there's a lot more diversity in there than some of the older books have. Um, a journey. Someone starts in one place and they kind of go all over the map. But the plot is initially about freedom. So you can guess that the title of the first book is Liberation,
Liberation.
but it's about freedom from the physical shackles that might bind you or the societal shackles that might bind you from becoming everything that you should be. Think tropes like Lost Prince or, someone who doesn't know what they're inheriting or things like that. And as they go through this journey, they discover a lot more about themselves, and the problem suddenly grows a lot bigger. So by the time you get to the second book, you're seeing not only are they pursuing a crown that they should have, and they're going to have to fight for it, but also that there is this growing evil in the world that is sort of like a madness. It's almost sort of like zombies, but not zombies. But it's this sickness that's spreading through the world, and they don't really know why or what's causing it, but they realize that this battle is much bigger than just them trying to get their throne, right? It's to fight this deep-seated evil that's spreading throughout not only their kingdom, but other kingdoms, and that they are the only ones that really have some of the powers to stop it.
Kind of like a shift from the political, um, morally gray war to a more good versus evil conflict, kind of like a setting aside of personal ambitions and such. Is that a bit of the theme that I'm picking up on?
Definitely not super clear good versus evil, but absolutely learning to set aside or learning to choose what's important and what that choice means. So actually that leads into the title of the second book, which is Sundering. And so that kind of implies that at this point your choice is split. You know, you have to make a choice about who you're going to be, how you're going to use your power, and whether that serves you or serves the rest of the world or helps the people around you. And those choices have massive ramifications, which is what leads into the third book, Schism, where, this is world-shattering stuff. And those choices that you have made translate to people getting hurt, people being saved, your soul being saved. What choices that affects you personally and everyone around you.
And so in your short story, clearly there's like a real Romani influence for the characters in this particular book. You know, this traveling group of tinkerers and dancers and musicians. Um, you mentioned earlier diversity. Clearly, with your illustration, like behind you and such, it looks like it has a bit of a a bit of a Middle Eastern flavor in some of your work. What other cultures inform the different groups in your world, and how did that contribute to your structuring of your different nations?
There is a ton of just diversity across the map because the map is huge. Um, and in addition to just regular humans and how they differ just by lifestyle, like, there are itinerant peoples who, yes, absolutely are inspired by the Romani, and they don't have houses, they have caravans and they move around and they focus on trade and services. Um, but there are also magic imbued humans. And so that adds a massive amount of diversity and a lot of depth to the map because I also have mer people who have water magic in their blood. And so now the whole map isn't just a bunch of land masses, but the whole ocean is colonized as well. And so my Mer people, I decided to use a lot of Asian influences. Hats off to my grandparents and wanted to really incorporate that and make something really unique. Most of the Mer people are very militaristic, and their culture is um, just inherently different from regular humans. And actually, some of it's also inspired by the fact that they have water magic. So they almost act like fish in some ways. They school, they are very group oriented. There's not as much sexual dimorphism among them. So they don't care as much about man versus woman mores, things like that. And they're just so different. And so there's one race, there's a race for every element of magic. So there are also people influenced by air magic, fire magic, earth magic. And a lot of the really cool aspects of my cultures come from those peoples. You mentioned that there was maybe a Middle Eastern influence. And yes, so my people that live up in the upper northwest corner of my world are a fairly temperate desert people, and they were inspired most of all by the Thar Desert in India. And so they're semi-nomadic. It's kind of like what you'd think with a Bedouin type of culture, except that it's more temperate weather, and so their lifestyle changes a bit based on that. Um, and then there are regular humans in that area, and there are people with fire magic in their blood. And so there's also differences amongst those peoples because of the influence of the magic.
Interesting. You know, in my own world, I also have a race of merfolk, and I plan to eventually include them prominently at some point. But I'll be honest, they are hard to write. It is hard to figure out how to make the goals and abilities of races on land and in the water mix and mesh in a way that makes sense and makes for compelling
Mhm.
interactions. Did you run into that struggle at all when you were writing about the merfolk? Did you concentrate on just their own world in the water, or did you intermingle them much with the interests of people on land? And if so, how did you figure out how to plot that out?
That's a great point. And so there is a lot of conflict, but just inherently because they're so different from each other, and some things the Mer just don't understand about humans, and the humans just don't understand about Mer, that there is extreme racial tension. And that's actually a key facet of my plot in The Keepers of Midgate. One of the main characters is a princess of the Mer Kingdom, Shigo, and she is uh, promised to a land prince, which has never been done. Like it's just not done. And at the beginning of these stories, a lot of people involved in that part of the plot are extremely racist and have not grown at all. So they're starting from a place of zero tolerance, zero patience for differences between themselves and the people in the other cultures or other kingdoms. Mer stay with Mer. They don't intermix. They consider it weakening the blood too, so they also kind of look down on humans. And there's a ton of tension from that. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So in your short story, you have a magic system whereby your characters can send messages over long distances. They essentially craft these little bird-like forms of air that carry their words on the wind. And I thought it was a really cool touch because not only was it a interesting mechanic that looked and felt different from other forms of air magic, but also you have a lot of scenes where the messages themselves take on the attributes of living beings and the language you're able to use of like the struggling, weakening, flapping wings and the different things really evoke sympathy for what are essentially letters. And I thought
Yeah.
that was a really fun touch. I love it when a writing choice operates on multiple levels, and I felt like that was something that operated on the level of both creating a cool mechanic but also creating a emotional tie to the story and a way to set the mood of certain moments without even using your characters. And I'm curious, so that's your air magic. Are there any other similar mechanics that you've created for your earth or your water or your fire magic where you have unique mechanics to your world?
I think most similar to that is actually one that I haven't included a whole lot in my story, but I've mentioned it as an aside. The earth magic users can also craft messages. Their messages work through vibration, so they can send a message basically through the ground, and they're used in war quite frequently. And so those people are called drummers, and if they have the gift of being able to make these messages, they're incredibly useful for communication across the battlefield or for sometimes communication from temple to temple. Um, but the other not all the magics have exactly the same types of skills, so those communication skills are very, very special.
Okay, interesting. And so probably my favorite thing about this story was how quickly you were able to establish emotional ties to your characters, which isn't always the case in a short story. I think if a short story is going to struggle, the main place it's going to struggle is in catching the reader and getting them invested in a short enough amount of time to then also carry the plot home. And I really liked how you used a lot of kind of like mirroring moments with different characters to create that investment. So you had the initial, connection between Lyra and her mother with music, and then when you brought Mina in, there was, or Mina, I'm not, whichever the
Yeah.
pronunciation is, there was also the connection through dance and music, and you're able to like foster these relationships, and the music also fed into the magic. And so by having those three effects centered around the same theme, you're able to make everything more invested by having them all tied together. Um, does music play a large part in the rest of your work? Is this a particular theme of this short story? Or was that just something that you consciously used to create the resonant theme throughout?
The focus is definitely something that I wanted to bring into my world through this short story. So, Lyra is a main character. She's probably the main female character in The Keepers of Midgate, and you meet her when she's older. And but when you meet her, you know that she's a wayfarer. That's what I call my kind of itinerant trading groups. And so you know that she's a wayfarer and you know that she loves music and you know that she loves singing and dancing and that her family has a fairly lucrative business doing this. But also just that that's where her passion lies. And you don't necessarily know much about how she got to be who she is at the beginning of the books. But being a dark epic fantasy author, of course, I throw her through the ringer during the big books, and
Of course.
you don't get to see that happy background that like where she really came from and what made her her when she's going through all this other stuff as an adult. And so I really, really wanted to tell that story to help you understand her better and understand that, you know what? Not all characters have a terrible childhood. She actually has a great childhood. She has great family, a really close-knit network, and a lot of passion for the lifestyle that she lives. And so that air magic and those skills that she has that she develops in the short story do continue on, and you'll see that passion for music and dance and expressiveness, joyfulness. You'll see that come out in her in the big books too.
Nice. I think your short story was the most emotionally impactful of the ones in the anthology. Like all the different short stories had their own strengths. Like Richard Schweitzer's has this really lovely prose, Brendan Noble has this wonderful world immersion, and I really like the emotional touch of yours because I felt an immediate connection to the characters. The relationship between the two girls felt so warm and so real, and the relationship between her and each of her family members felt very unabashedly deep and affectionate. Like, she admires her mother. She thinks of her mother as the most beautiful person in the world. She respects her uncles and her cousins in this traveling caravan, and there's this understanding of reliance and also her trying to hold on to the ability to accept others from outside the caravan, her trying to hold on to a vulnerability. I really liked all those elements, and I thought that they worked well to evoke emotion. So I appreciated that. And I had a question I was going to build out of from all of that diatribe I just gave, and the question has flown away from my mind. But I guess um, I guess throughout the closing of the story, there's a lot of development of certain motivations in Lyra's character that stem from those relationships and the experiences she had in the short story. There's a deep motivation towards certain skills she wants to develop: healing, music,
Mhm.
dance, these different things. Are those things that were featured in the books that you retroactively are now like putting into the short story as foreshadowing of why she likes those things?
Absolutely. Yes, it's all very, very closely connected. And as I mentioned, when Lyra is older and you meet her in the Keepers of Midgate, she has a lot of these skills. And, I kind of mentioned, hey, she has these skills from living this type of lifestyle and providing these types of services. She really had a role in her family and a useful one, multiple useful roles, in fact. And I just wanted readers who have read The Keepers of Midgate to have a chance to understand how became that way and kind of what that background was. But then on the other end, if you're reading the short story first, absolutely there is foreshadowing. You're going to see this character who has a massive potential for growth, and she is open-minded, and she wants to learn, and she wants to see the world through these beautiful rosy lenses that a lot of people just don't keep. And it's beautiful. I think she's my sunshine character, and she is just really incredibly unique. And so you'll see those things translate into pieces of who she is as an adult.
Cool. And so, like, about how wide of a gap is there between this short story and when she's introduced in the novels?
I would say about 7 or 8 years-ish.
Okay. Yeah, so fairly close. She's then still fairly young when she comes
Still fairly young.
into the main series. Okay. And one thing that popped into this story multiple times and definitely seemed to hint at a connection to the character but didn't spell it out was dragons. And I'm very, very glad you included dragons and very cool sounding dragons in your short story because I patterned the cover of this book on dragons and I named it Wonders and Dragons to fit with the epic fantasy theme and then realized, well, I don't have dragons in my short story. I sure hope other people do. So how do those fit in your story? They're described in all these very vibrant ways in the short story with the different colorations and the feathers and the way they
Yeah.
interact with the air magic. What role do they play in the overall series?
Dragons overall play a number of essential roles in the main story. However, again, this is thanks to you. I never got to really incorporate air dragons yet into the previous two published big books. And so I wanted to start elaborating on them and introducing them to the reader because they are an important part of the world and you will see them eventually. So this was my first chance to really go,
Awesome.
there are air dragons and they're gorgeous, they're really cool. And so again, similar to the peoples of Midgate, each dragon species is also affiliated with a particular element of magic. And so air dragons are the ones that are featured in this short story, but there are also fire dragons, earth dragons, water dragons, and sun dragons. So I have five elements. And those each of those species looks different, acts a little bit different, has different magical powers or abilities that are related to their element. And so these ones I really wanted to give a feel of that element. So, like the feathers, this is a very unique thing to air dragons. Not all of my dragons are feathered. Not all of them are the same size. None of them are the same color. And so there's just a ton of diversity in the world of dragon species as well as human species.
Cool. So you mentioned that you have the races that line up with the five elements, you have the dragons that line up with the five elements. That makes me curious, is there like a creation mythology or origin for where these come from and why they're lined up with the five elements, or is it just kind of baked into the world pre-understood?
There is some mythology to their beliefs that are very closely related to these.
Just
So
occurs to me, the five-faced God, is that where that
there you
phrase
go.
comes from then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they believe that each of these elements are an aspect of God. And they call God Ea. They also perceive Ea physically as the sun in the sky. So when they see the sun, they call it the eye of Ea. He's always watching, he's watching over you, good or bad. But so
Santa
that
Claus.
five-faced God is their way of kind of saying like all of these things, these magics that make up the world are the different aspects of our God. Um, there is also another paired mythology in my world that ties man and dragon. And so they believe that way back during the time of creation, that Ea created uh, dragons from his head and humans from his heart. And they are never meant to be apart. They don't function fully apart. And so there is this belief that man and dragon should be bonded. But during the time period of my main book series, that connection has kind of been lost over time. Not completely lost. There are still keepers, but there aren't nearly as many of them as there used to be. And there's kind of a little bit of a fear of dragons and a fear of dragon keepers, thinking, well, they're kind of different. They're off. They don't really fit in our, pretty little boxes of society, which is true because when you bond, it changes everything and it changes your soul. So, um, that part of it I really enjoy because again, my dragons are characters. They have entire personalities and histories and all of that, just like the people do. And so, because they're made from the head, they're very logical and they're very not empathetic. If anything, I kind of coded them after my own experience. Of, just not feelings, processing things and being neurodivergent and not fitting in with the normal the normal pattern of thinking. And so I love writing from the dragon's perspectives. It's just super fun and it's different. And then the humans, of course, being humans, are fickle, emotional, reactive because they're made
What?
from the
Okay, I love everything about that. And it's making me think of several different mythologies and stuff. So, you got the five-faced God, five aspects of a single God in one. That makes me think of the Judeo-Christian Trinity. You've got made from the head, made from the heart. That makes me think of the Norse, who built the entire world and all the races from different pieces of one being. You've got the sundering of the mind and the heart, which makes me think of the Greeks, who had male and female split off from the same being, who are constantly yearning to be rejoined as one soul. Um, so there's a lot of different mythologies and religions that come to mind right away. Were there different ones that particularly inspired you, or is this kind of all unintentional similarities?
They definitely are inspired by my own knowledge and experience of the real world. Many aspects of my world are absolutely inspired by things that I see in the real world. And so, but can you pin it down to just a single one? Probably not. I used to sit and just like read encyclopedias on different topics. So I loved reading through. My dad used to have this book on
Such a writer thing.
cults. I know. But I didn't have any other books to read, but no, I had lots of books to read. But I would sit and just read through the compendiums of different cults and religions, and it was a fascinating book. So I just love the different ways that people understand their world and understand, a higher power, whether they believe in a higher power and how that being interacts with them. Um, I used to sit and read encyclopedias on just science and technology development. I actually have a whole pile of them. I'd show them to you if they weren't downstairs, but um, and just really kind of taking the pieces that make sense. I guess for example, the people of the northwestern deserts. I knew that they lived in a fairly dry area because I had already made my map and modeled climate patterns. And I was like, yeah, that area is dry. So those people are going to be a people that are used to not having a lot of resources, um, probably needing water during periods of the year. They're probably going to have to be migratory to a degree unless they have a really good water source around which they can build a city. And I started more from the concept and then read about cultures around the world that have that type of lifestyle to accommodate the environment and just kind of learned what I could about all of them. And I found that the Thar Desert was a really, really good fit for a lot of my inspiration because of the match to the environment. But also, I took some inspiration from Mongolia, some inspiration from Arabic culture, and just little bits and pieces here and there.
It is really cool. That is such a good way to start with your world building. Like I started writing the basics of my series when I was much younger, and I did not take that methodical approach. And ever since, there have been little things that have just like needled me about the setup of my world because I'm like, I would have been so much better off if I'd planned this out a little more ahead of time and like actually modeled, okay, what would the ecosystem be like in these different areas? Let's make a bigger world map. Let's get everything straight before we start writing stories and not boxing myself into corners. So the fact that you like modeled the regions, their weather, and what the climates would be like, and then went to the cultures that were there, and then fed into yours. That's a just a really good way to approach the creative process.
I don't know if I planned it well that way or if it's just kind of an artifact of the fact that I've been mulling over this for actual decades. The, the map, the inception of this world of Midgate as a world and as a basic plot line, all of that really came into my head when I was, I think, 13. And back then I started thinking, I started plotting and I drew a map and I chewed on that map for years and just started coloring in ecosystems and like major plant cover and elevations and
That is
things like
great.
that. And so, my map is pretty well thought out primarily because it's like 20 years old.
That's awesome. I think a lot of writers have those like fragments that last with them through their life. Like the short story that I'm featuring this anthology, I wrote the initial draft of this when I was 15. It was the first thing I ever wrote in fantasy. It was the first thing I ever
That's
wrote in this
cool.
world. And then I've rewritten it like four different times as I've been at different stages of skill in writing. And now
Hmm.
I've went back and rewrote it one final time to really make sure that the prose and the character beats and everything match up with where my stories are at now. But it
Hmm.
was so fun because when I opened up the file last week to kind of like do a final like spell check and everything on it, I actually opened up an old draft from when I was in a much earlier version of it. And I was comparing the pros across the two and comparing what I was emphasizing. I was like, it is so cool to see how much I've changed, how much things have improved, and how much more I know. And I'm sure it's
Yeah.
similar for you when you look at your map that you created when you were younger and you see the different changes you've made to it over the years and the different inspiration. It's really neat to have that thing that's lasted through all of your uh career, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely see, the original plot line that I had in my head was essentially three-quarters of book one and a little bit of book three, and it was a much simpler story. It wasn't epic in proportion as much. It was more just kind of, oh, Prince after his crown, blah, 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 and it was like, oh, this is like it's all right. Yeah, I'd make a good traditional medieval story, but when I got serious about writing a couple of years ago and said, you know what, this is just knocking around in my head. It's driving me insane. I am going to lose my mind if I don't start actually working on this and making it real. Once I actually worked on it, I realized that the story was way bigger and that there was more to it. The stakes were a lot higher. There were more characters involved, more, and they were playing essential roles. And they were people that I hadn't really put a lot of thought into. I was really focused in on the main people. And it just grew by leaps and bounds after that. So yeah, if I go back and look at my first like plot outline, I just shake my head.
Yeah, it's really great to be able to have benchmarks to compare it to. So I think one of the first things that I saw after I met you on Facebook and we started talking about doing the anthology, one of the first things I saw you post about, aside from that, was an advanced review copy app that you're working on. And I thought
Yeah,
that that would be something any authors or readers who watch this interview might be curious about because it looks like it's going to be a really lovely opportunity once it's up and running. I have all my books on there. I saw you have a number of your books on there, and there's several other authors who I've seen around social media who have, really, really lovely looking work available on there that's free for readers in exchange for a review. And if you wanted to talk about how you developed that, like what got you started and decided to do it, feel free to share anything.
sure. Yeah, so that's one of my latest ADD projects. I just have been around the book groups for a while, and as an indie author have found that, hey, having my review team is one of the most important things that I can have as a tool to help get the word out. Reviewers are some of my most important partners. They make and break a book. And
You people give us our careers.
you give us
Please
life.
review, leave reviews.
Yeah, it really is true. And so there's just such a need for a closer relationship between indie authors and book reviewers, ARC readers particularly. There tend to be people who are especially dedicated to advanced review copies and, want to help and want to be involved and, and they love it just as much as we love having them. And so as I was like jumping around these Facebook groups and following people on Instagram, I kind of realized that there was just this repeating record that was just going, I need arcs. I have time. I can read something for somebody right now. If you've got a deadline tomorrow, I will get the book read and I'm going to review it for you. And then on the other side, authors going, guys, I need reviews. Please, please be an ARC reader. Sign up to be an ARC reader. This book is awesome. So I kept hearing these, two sides of the same coin, and it just seemed like a service that was missing from my little circle of awesome people. And so I thought, well, this isn't necessarily a super complex thing to build. I do databases and data science for my job. So I was like, man, I could probably build something here, and just provide it as a service to my lovely fantasy readers and authors and just get people talking and get people connected. Um,
Yeah.
and actually, there was another broken record of people who did sign up for reviews and we're always using different tools for keeping track of their calendar. And some people have a really meticulous method on Google Calendar, and some of them write it all down in a little standalone notebook. And other people are out there going, gosh, what do you guys do? Because it's so hard to keep track of everything I said that I would do. And I really want to follow through for these authors and make sure that I do it on time. Um, and so I started working on this little project. It's like I said, it's a fairly simple thing. It's really meant for readers to be able to save ARC opportunities to their profile so that they remember that they're there. You can just heart one and be like, ooh, I want to look at that later. Or you can say, hey, I actually signed up for this and got accepted. So this one's in my queue. I know that I need to work on it. And here's all the links that I need to make sure that I fill it out later. On the author side, you have the ability to list any fantasy or sci-fi book and indicate the tropes, the any content warnings, the plot, the blob blurb that goes on the front or the back of the book, and just all of those little key things that a reader is going to be looking for to try and evaluate whether or not they're going to like the book. Um, some of the really important pieces that I thought needed to be in there were a preview link and a direct sign up link or email for the author. And, I can't tell you how many times I've asked about an arc, hoping that I could help somebody because I love reading too, only to find out that the writing style just wasn't for me, or especially like point of view or tense, I'm really, really picky about. And so if I get a first person present tense book, I'm probably going to set it down and say, hey, man, that this one's probably not for me. I'm not your target audience.
No
And
Hunger Games for you, huh?
no Hunger Games for me. I can't do it. I just can't. Um, there's tons of people who love that. And so having all of those different pieces are part of every book's profile. And that way the ARC reviewers can look through them and go, that matches exactly what I like. I love these tropes. I love this tense. I love everything that they're highlighting here. I think this one's for me. And then they're connected. Um, I also I didn't want it to be, an account that people really had to keep and copy and paste all their information. So it's not really where you keep your reviews. You can save any book to it, whether it's on BookFunnel or can't even think of all the other methods, but people distribute through Google
Yeah.
Forms and through, professional services or just through their email. It can accommodate any of that. So it's just kind of your personal bookkeeping thing. And it's
Yeah,
free.
and
So
I think one of the cool things about it was you mentioned the different tropes and stuff. I think if I'm not mistaken, people can like if on the reader end they can like click the tropes they like and then just filter the whole library through that, right? So they can see the
yeah,
books that feature the tropes they're looking for.
yeah, you
That
can
is
filter
super
by
cool.
anything. The other
Like when
cool thing that
oh
I
sorry.
added was, sorry, I get really excited about this.
Yeah,
But the other cool thing I did put is on the person's profile, your reader profile, you can put in content warnings that you want to avoid. And that's just so that it automatically filters out anything that's just really, something you just do not want to see and don't want to deal with. And on the other flip side of that, um, sometimes we have these like reading challenges where it's like, hey, for the month of May, since it's Asian American Pacific Islanders Heritage Month, we want to find authors that have Asian Pacific Islander heritage and add those people to our list. You can filter by those characteristics too if the author provided them. And so lots of just personalization built into it so that the list is more curated for you. And then beyond that, you can filter pretty much any of the fields down and make it even narrower.
yeah, it's super cool because the primary way I'm familiar with finding ARC reads is you go onto one of a billion Facebook groups, 98% of which are pretty much dead and only filled with spam bots, and
Yeah.
you post your book to all of them, and you get about 20 responses across all the groups, and 18 of them are spam bots offering you different editing services or whatnot. And the other two are people going, oh, well, maybe, looks okay. You know, it's like it's a lot of spread out mixed quality groups that
Yeah.
I would assume on the reader end are also very tough because you basically have to scroll through every post, which is every genre of every
Mhm.
writer who's posting there, and it's not necessarily going to be much of what you're looking for. And so to
Yeah.
have like this thing that you're creating where you have the groupings and the tags and everything so people can find what they want fast and know that they're going to get a list of things that fit their interests. I think it's a great idea and I really hope it takes off. So what was the name of it and where can people find links to it?
It's the Indie Fantasy Bookworm Tracker. And it's just available through really any of my social media. There are links to it. My website, rmkrogman.com/links, it's linked there. Um, Eventually, there will be at least a Google Play Android friendly app for it. We're in testing for that right now just to make sure that it works perfectly. And so that'll be hopefully even easier for people to find. But the desktop version is always available through a link that you can find on my social pages. Um,
Perfect.
yeah. Oh yeah, and I
Oh,
have
cool.
a Facebook group for it too. So it's linked there, and the only thing I post on that group is ARC opportunities that I think look cool. So it's
Awesome. Yeah,
taken
I
straight
think
from the
I'm a
app.
member of that group. I was kind of poking around at it earlier today, actually.
Yeah.
That's super fun. Another thing that you've been working on lately is a anthology. I believe it's called Reign of Dragons or
Yep.
Realm of Dragons,
Reign of Dragon.
which Reign of Dragons, which I backed and I cannot wait to receive the book from. It's just a whole list of authors who I've done Kickstarter swaps with before, who I've seen on all the same author groups, IFA and Kickstarter for authors, and a whole bunch of really interesting looking folks putting together this beautiful, beautiful anthology. Like the artwork for it is stunning. Um, Tell us a little bit about that project.
Sure. So that will be my next publication. It will come out just probably about a week and a half before Wonder and Dragons does. But yeah, it is beautiful. I was so honored to be invited to be part of this dragon collection. And just because someone identified me as a dragon fantasy author, I'm like, oh, I have achieved my goals in life. I am identified as a dragon fantasy author.
My
Um,
child is so happy with me right now. Like my inner child is just
I'm so
rejoicing.
happy. So, so yeah, I just the people in it are absolutely wonderful authors from all over the world. And each short story is dragon focused, but you get a whole wide range of subgenres. So, my story in that is again related to the world of Midgate, but it is a early prequel. It is the first time that I have given a story that's not directly tied to all the characters that are in the main series. It's explaining to you basically why a certain aspect of the world is the way it is. Because you might be wondering after reading some of my books, going, "Oh, where are those things? Why aren't we seeing them? Shouldn't they come into play? Shouldn't they show up a little bit?" There's a reason. That story tells you the reason, and it goes all the way back to the Empire days. So it's like a totally different culture yet again, inspired by Greek and Roman history, and
Right.
so I had a lot of fun writing that because it was kind of like exploring a whole other world. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, the artwork in it is absolutely incredible. We hit a couple of different stretch goals, so that meant adding another illustration for every author as we could. And mine was one of the ones that had a illustration added. So I'm super honored to get to work with Joe Ricasa. He's phenomenal.
Oh, he is really good. I follow him
Oh my
on
goodness.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, I follow him. I followed him for a long time, but I've never been able to like pull the trigger on getting a book cover
Hmm.
because I mean he's prestigious, right? And
Right.
I get to have a picture from him. So I'm really excited. I think it's going to be an incredibly visual scene. Lots of light and lots of color in that scene, and that's what his strengths are. So I think it's going to be pretty great.
Yeah. It is so cool that you guys were able to do this Kickstarter at this level and achieve the success you had without being able to commission the art ahead of time to like show people the art. So it was really cool that you're able to have enough special features unlocked immediately that were visible, that were pre-commissioned to build up enough excitement and enthusiasm to keep breaking the stretch goals, hit these other art goals that aren't necessarily readily visible to the backers. It's so cool that you were still able to keep moving forward with that. And the stuff that is shown so far is amazing. And I would encourage people to go check that anthology out. It is gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah, it's open for late pledges until the 28th, I think. So you can still get a fancy book. Um, so do check it out. But I gotta say, honestly, the whole thing just came together primarily because of our lead editors, Jasmine Young and Robert Zangari. They just did so much work planning. I think a lot of the artwork came together because they communicated early on with the artists and said, "Hey, we want to line you up for 3 to 6 images. Can we book you right now and get you started and have you on the hook so that you can start right away?" And they said, "Yeah, absolutely." And so they kind of coordinated everything, moving 100 chess pieces at once. And that's really why it came together to be as beautiful as it is thanks to them. So, like I said, I'm just basking in a sea of incredible people who are keeping me afloat.
Nice. And so had two other questions written down here, or three actually. What's next on the horizon for you as an author? Like, so you've got this three-part series, you've got your other two novels, and you have, you said further plans for expanding the world of Midgate. Do
Yep.
you have a concrete idea for how far you want to take this, or are you just going to keep spinning off in the same world, or do you have other series outside of it planned? What's it look like?
I do have specific plans, but also there's probably potential for additional growth and rabbit chases down the road. But in the short term, I am finishing Schism, book three of the main trilogy, and that I'm hoping will be out maybe next year. And then after that, I have another novella planned for the stories of Midgate, closely related to the main series. So this is going to be a character backstory for my assassin character. His name is Thordren. And I time all of these intentionally. So when you get the backstory, if you actually read it in the release order, the backstory gives you a key piece of information about who they are that pertains to the bigger trilogy. So I'm doing it on purpose. That story is going to be so much more tragic if I release it after. Um, so that'll be next.
It's
And
important.
then everything's tragic that I write. I'm sorry. My goal is to make you feel something. And so far, my
Your
last review
reader's
on
not,
Marked, someone said they
if
cried, and
your
I was like,
reader's not suffering, you're not doing your job.
exactly, exactly. But after that, I will probably do a sequel for The Keepers of Midgate. It won't be a trilogy, it'll probably just be a standalone sequel. But I'm really excited about telling, kind of changing the stakes, changing where the characters are at in their life, working with slightly older characters who are, more into their adulthood. And I'm really excited about that one too. So I'll probably do that. And then I will do a prequel that goes back to the fall of the empire. Again, there's just a lot of history that drives what my world is like and why the culture is the way it is, why the social rules are the way they are, I mean, even how different aspects of trade came to be have a lot to do with the empire. And there's always a thing that they refer to called the Great Cleansing. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It was a magical cleansing of the common people. It was led by the church, the temple, and the empire, and obviously it was just a power grab. But it was tragic. It changed the map and ultimately led to the downfall of the empire. Now, you know all this from reading my other books, but what you don't know is some of the really personal stories that come out of that conflict. And so I'm going to write a prequel about the Great Cleansing, primarily probably from the perspective of the Mer people.
I think I'm going to repeat what I messaged to you yesterday before arranging the interview. You're a terrible person.
Thank you.
Like, this is just not nice things to do to your readers, and I absolutely love it. So, of your books you have so far, what is the favorite thing you've written? What is the one that you're like, I had a plan, I wanted to have a certain effect, and I really achieved what I was going for with this one?
Hmm. That is such a hard question. I knew you were going to ask me, and I still don't have a great answer. Um, can I say three different answers, but for three different reasons?
You've only got five books. I mean, three is pushing it past the halfway mark, but I suppose.
Okay. I will probably, uh, man, that's hard. I guess I would say Sundering so far is my favorite book. So this is book two of the main trilogy. And I think the reason that I like it the most is because it ramps everything up. Liberation is, in the full view of the trilogy, is the exposition of the epic story. And you start to really get that escalating action and major change points in character arcs, major change points in physical, where they're at and where they're going, plans and directions. Um, and you really start to see the characters settle into who they are and make really core decisions that impact the end of the story. And I've had a lot of other readers tell me the same thing, that this is where, holy cow, we thought Liberation was great, but this thing is steroids and we love it. So I guess I'm most proud of that, but I don't know. I like all my books. I really like them.
Cool. Before you get to your other two answers, I guess I'm something I'm noticed lately. Whenever I talk to authors and ask them about their favorite books, the second one is usually the one that comes up. Like I know it's true for me too. Like in my main series, the second book is far and away my favorite. And I noticed that with a lot of authors. They feel like, okay, I introduced the world in the first one, I did the world building, and then the second one is like where everything took off. I've noticed the opposite though with readers. I guess you said your readers do like your second book, so not following
Mhm.
that pattern, but it seems like readers often and viewers like with movie trilogies and such, it's always the first or the last that people are like really attached
Mhm.
to. But for the
Yeah.
people who created them, it often seems to be the second. And I don't know what exactly that means, but it's a curious pattern.
It is an interesting pattern because, and I've heard of that too, is like the murky middle. Sometimes we know where we started and we know where we want to end, but the middle is hard to plot. For whatever reason, Sundering was not hard to plot. Sundering flew out of my fingertips. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I knew exactly where I wanted it to go, and I think that that's reflected in the reader's experience. They seem to feel that same dedicate conviction that they know where they're going. So it doesn't feel like a murky middle to me. So that's good. I'm not sure how I avoided it because there's a lot of moving pieces going at this point, but that's also only my answer until I finish Schism. That might be my
There you
favorite
go.
in the end. We'll see.
Nice. So, and what were the other two reasons? You said you had three reasons for three different works. What were the other two?
Well, okay. So this is the first book that I published. It's called Marked, and it's free if you join my newsletter because I want people to have a chance to see if they like my writing. And the thing that my sole goal with Marked was to make you feel something. It is a dark fantasy. It's about a boy. He's about 8 or 9 years old. And it is pretty tragic. It'll tug at your heartstrings. And so my goal is to make you feel that.
I'm
And I've
noticing a
had
pattern with your
multiple
work.
people tell me that they cried went during or after reading it. One person said they went and took a shower and cried in the bottom of their shower. And I was like, yes, mission
Highest praise
accomplished.
imaginable.
So if you want to feel
Anytime
something,
someone has told me they cried during my work was like a high point of a month for me. I just like rode the wave of euphoria forever after that. Like, yes, I have achieved.
yeah, exactly. I mean and that's the goal. And so I think, I try and carry that emotion through. You mentioned that Whisperer actually has a lot of emotional pull to it, and I'm so happy to hear that. That's usually kind of my goal is to really make you feel what the characters are going through and feel it at a depth that sticks with you. So I was really proud of that. Um, the last one I guess I'd say I'm proud of is kind of a unique one. This is the only fantasy romance that I've done. Um, it's not like it fits in with the mood of my other books. So don't expect anything light or really spicy or anything like that. It fits with my other styles, but um it's on the verge of romantic tragedy. And it's inspired by Romeo and Juliet in the way that it's a love story. They're separated by their families being enemies and they fall hard. And there's just it is a love story, and that is the focus of this book. But I think what I'm most proud of in this is that it's chock full of art. And so this was my first Kickstarter. I worked to try and make it a really incredible release. My other books have black and white drawings in them, but this is the only one that has color, full illustrations. And they're just gorgeous. I work with my same cover artist that does my covers, and I think she's phenomenal. So she did, I think,
Agreed.
6 pieces of art. Actually, no, eight pieces of art inside of this book, as well as the
Yeah,
cover.
long before I knew who you were as an author, I had seen your the artwork that's actually behind you on the wall right now.
Yeah.
Like I'd seen that artwork floating around on different groups and stuff, and I always really liked the look of that cover with the full spread across the jacket and stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you signed up and I looked up your career, I was actually like, oh, it's that person with that art I always see that I really like. So
Yes, yes, that is Celebril art. She's amazing. She's done most of my book covers and most of my interior art. So she's just
nice.
awesome.
It is super cool. The question that I always have finished these little conversations with is, what inspired you to be an author? Was there a work, a story, a novel, a series that like hit you when you were young and made you say, okay, I want to do this too?
Yes, definitely. I've always been an avid reader. I've read everything, grew up without TV and way out in the country, so all I had was books. But I would say the key person, the key book was Dragonflight by Anne McCaffrey. I worshipped Anne McCaffrey, and Dragonflight was my favorite book by her. I've read the whole series, and just everything about her world building, her characters, her story. I just loved. I completely fell in love with her work. And one thing that's really cool about Anne McCaffrey is that she is trained in biology for like medical biology, and that you can see it translate into her works. She's very scientific about things and how things ended up the way that they did. And she has like anatomical drawings of her dragons and how they're physically laid out. And like she was a nerd. I love it. I am also a trained biologist, so I'm just a huge fan of bringing that into your world building and having things really like make sense. Um, but I also really loved the bond between humans and dragons, and the fact that the dragons are characters. They're sentient, they have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own skills. They're not just a big monster, and they're not just an accessory. And I really, really loved that concept. And I've carried that through my work, obviously, as well. And yeah, so I'd say she inspired most of the idea that I want to write fantasy. I want to write dragon fantasy, and it's going to look something like this.
It's really awesome. I haven't actually read anything by Anne McCaffrey, so I can't make any intelligent comments on her writing or
Same.
anything. But it sounds like a sensible place for you to have come from for your inspiration. That's really awesome. Well, thank you for having the conversation. To people still watching this, thank you so much for watching it. And please check out both Rebecca's work, Keepers of Midgate and Stories of Midgate. And then also consider pre-ordering the anthology, Wonders and Dragons, a Midwest Fantasy Sampler. You'll get her short story, Whisperers, along with 9 short stories by 9 other fabulous fantasy writers in the Midwest area. Thanks.
Thank you.